I'm here with the great Zack of Goatwhore to talk about Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven. Epic name for an epic album that comes out on an epic date of October 7 on Metal Blade Records. How are you doing today?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, looking at this album, perhaps with a little bit more of a clear vision now that the whole process is behind you, did you guys go into this album with clear goals and expectations on what you wanted the record to be, or was the process a little bit more organic?
It was pretty organic, to be honest. And we never really stopped writing record to record. So, there was a continual kind of process from Vengeful Ascension, just kind of stashing ideas, like in between tours when we had time, just keeping those kind of juices flowing. But I guess when we really sat down and really started concentrating on a collection of songs for the record and just piling up material, we kind of weeded out the weak and picked the stronger material that actually made it on the record. But the whole process in general, man, such a collaborative effort, and just the extra time that the kind of pandemic afforded us, we used to our advantage to really try to make these songs the best they could be, and as with the whole record, with every step of the way. So
do you look at records as an opportunity to challenge yourselves and improve and change and grow the sound of Goatwhore?
Totally. And I wouldn't say it's like a conscious thing we really sit down and think about too much, but I know just personally as a drummer and musician, there's certain things that, like maybe just organically just kind of evolve, and certain things that just taste wise, I like to maybe add in. But also, there's things that, I think everybody's just trying to step up their game as a musician, a performer, and also just the kind of things you learn along the way through trial and error of making records and touring, just knowing what to do and what not to do, and just being zeroed in on who you are as a band and as a musician. Just kind of, it all plays in just over time to maybe maturing, maybe that's not the right word, but just, kind of just a natural evolution. And sometimes it works out for the best, sometimes it doesn't. But I think in this case, we're pretty happy with how it turned out.
Do you look at the gap? This is the longest gap between records for you guys. So do you look at this gap as a result of the pandemic, or were there any other circumstances that pushed the gap between two records to be what it currently is?
The pandemic definitely added, a year or two on to the gap. But aside from that, we toured so much on Vengeful Ascension, and then to the tail end of the us playing shows for that record in support of it, that's when the pandemic kind of hit. So then that just added to the span of the gap. And so yeah, 5 years is a long time, and the longest that we've had between records. So I guess in a way it kind of builds up the demand for a record, but at the same time, we don't want that to happen again.
Now, obviously, this was out of your control. This is not something that you planned or decided to do. But is there a negative impact that, from your point of view, that comes with having such a gap between albums, or in this specific case, you don't see that as being an issue?
I guess yes and no, depending on who you ask and how you're looking at it. I guess from the label's perspective, they like to have bands on that 2-year schedule, record every 2 years, tour, and that cycle, but at the end of the day, it kind of is what it is. Every band kind of has their own ways of operating and their own timetables, and and especially with the pandemic, those things are kind of unforeseeable, and it just kind of is what it is. And I guess if you look at it from the positive aspect, it does kind of build up the hunger for material, instead of like, oh, they just had a record come out, I'm going to skip this one. So it kind of, I think this one people are pretty excited about, and I can kind of, I just kind of see that just in general from the general reactions, which is nice. It's obviously nice to see. So
Always nice when people are excited about a new album that you're about to release. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Nothing at all.
Now you talked a little bit about the creative process. What is the creative, or should I say, what is the starting point for that creative process for the band?
Honestly, it all starts with the riff, man. So Sammy, the king of the riff. I mean, these days, I guess we're a little more efficient with how we start off the process. And just because I live in Phoenix and our bass player lives in Austin, so we're kind of spread out. And so when we get together to write, Sammy will send us like a rough skeleton of a song structure. So when we actually get in a room together, we have a starting point and an agenda instead of just sitting there like we used to. It used to be him and I with just a jam box with tapes and tapes of just riffs, and we sit there and just go through a tape and you're like, all right, that sounds like a good first riff to a song. But then you end up just kind of sitting there staring at each other in a room and get kind of lost, So this way of doing things, we have like an objective for when we get into a room. We'll have like 3 songs to actually jam through and see if those structures work, and then kind of take it from there and make tweaks, and then just kind of go from there. So it all starts with the riff, and Sammy's been really good with just his general arranging skills and everything, man. He's been really kicking ass on his whole what he does, so that's just kind of the way we're doing things now, and it seems to work.
One of the things I noticed about the record is that it feels very balanced. It feels very cohesive. It has a lot of strength, but it brings together every single song under one single umbrella. Is this a result of a great design, of a great overall structure, or do you feel like the sound that you guys created for the album helps make the album feel that compact?
Well, I guess the sound just along the way can't hurt, because we had brilliant people working with us to make it sound that way. But at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to like the source and just the performances and just how we sound as a band, and how Sammy's tone reacts with my drums and just the way we play. So that's the general starting point. And I guess if you don't have that, it's almost like you can't polish a turd, in that saying. So, you start out with a good foundation, and then luckily everything else along the way with this record, sound wise and production wise, really worked out in our favor. But yeah, it is, every song kind of has its own personality and identity, but at the same time, it is a very cohesive unit as an album, which is cool. I think just the production, and while it is pretty raw, I guess, but it's kind of like a nice, perfect balance of punchy, direct, polished, raw. It's just straddles that line pretty well, I think.
And for the record, I want to make sure everybody knows that there are no turds being polished on this record. This is a turd-free record. Everything deserves to be where it is, and it's doing a great job exactly in the spot that you guys put it. So there's no turds there.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
If you had to pick a nucleus or the flame that ignites the fire on this record, sound-wise, do you feel like this album runs off of one element, or it's more a combination of elements?
Man, I think it's the whole band together, man. Just having obviously Sammy and Ben have been in this band since the get-go, and then I've been with them since started touring on the second record with them, so about 18 years. So just the dynamic of us playing together and knowing each other's playing styles, and just being very on the same page as a band. And also TA having toured with us for 8 years, and it's his first record with us, so just the sound of the band is it's a band, so every part is integral in the overall sound, so I think and everybody is striving to sound their best and play their best, so it all just comes into the final product.
That raw sound experience that you mentioned is undeniable. Perhaps the red line that connects the entire album. Is that, does that come from the many years of playing live, and you guys kind of maybe wanting to bring a little bit of that live experience into the studio?
Definitely, definitely, and that's a big reason that you know we like to have Jarrett Pritchard in the studio with us, because he worked with us. Obviously, he was our live engineer for a while, long time, and then he worked with us on the previous record and this record, and he just kind of knows what we're going for and knows how to capture, try to capture our, like, our live energy and essence, like in the studio, which we felt we were missing for on every other album. So it does kind of have that more kind of live aggression that we try to bring to the table. And I guess it kind of goes back to maybe just the mentality of the band being kind of rooted in the more old school way of doing things. Just kind of, while it being still raw, just still raw doesn't have to mean sound like it's recorded in a basement, or
Yeah.
so it's just one of those things, I mean, and yeah, to each their own. But yeah, I'm pretty happy just to be able to, this record having to meet that fine line of raw but still in your face, and holds up with any other kind of modern production, pretty much.
Yeah, it has, just because it's raw doesn't mean it's going to be murky. Like, you know what I mean? Like it feels, the whole album, it's almost designed like a live set, not just from how it sounds, but how the whole structure is put together. So it has a lot of that. It's almost like a live album that was recorded in the studio, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
But I think the energy that you're able to capture on a record like that is, it elevates the sound, the experience, everything that comes with it.
Excellent. I fully agree, man. Totally.
Now let's talk about your drum sound, because I thought your drums on this record were definitely one of the cornerstones of the foundation of the entire album. Did you tweak anything? Did you change anything coming into this record?
Man, well, I guess I did have a new kit for this record, and same same drum companies, but been always using Pearl drums, but tom sizes were a little bigger. I really experimented with the tuning, getting the toms right, getting the snare right. And aside from that, man, the studio we picked, part of the reason we picked it is because they have a phenomenal drum room. So the use of the actual room itself, and then utilizing different room mics in different positions, and like miking the tops and bottom of the toms and stuff like that, really kind of played into, I think from the get-go, we were just really concentrated on really getting a great drum sound, because you can kind of work on it, getting a great guitar sound anywhere pretty much. So the drum room was like what kind of sold us on using the studio. And then aside from that, once you get the raw core of the tracks being delivered to Kurt, and he does his thing with it, man. He just knocked it out of the park with the mix and everything. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with the way the drums came out. And it's one of those things for me. I wanted the drums to really sound natural, and you can tell that I'm playing them. They're not totally sound replaced. It's kind of the industry standard these days or whatever, but they still are really in your face and punchy and direct, and add to the intensity of the music.
You mentioned the mix. For a Goatwhore album to sound like a Goatwhore album, where do you want those drums to be in that mix?
I definitely don't want them overbearing. You know what I mean? I want them to work well musically. Obviously, I don't want them stepping over any other frequencies. Because Sammy's got such a large guitar sound. Everything has to have its place. But at the same time, I don't want the drums on a metal record need to be pretty forceful. You know what I mean? The kick has to be solid and really punchy and in your face, and the snares obviously got to be on the backbone of the rhythm section too. So, but it's one of those things too. Kurt is really good at kind of knowing where things should sit in the heavy metal context, because some of the bands he works with are really pretty over the top with the gnarly guitar sounds and low end everywhere, and he just knows how to make everything fit in, and come out of the speakers and sound pleasing to the listener.
Is it perhaps have time now to appreciate the efforts and the work that went into making this album? Does anything stand out in your mind from a positive or negative experience that you faced during the recording process or the creative process?
Man, looking back, I think everything was generally pretty positive, man. We were all in a pretty good space, just like, I guess mentally and just getting along and everything. And so I think the whole process was generally a pretty positive one, aside from just it takes a lot of, I guess, just put a record out these days takes a lot more time, just especially with the pandemic. And then, vinyl pressing plants are being backed up with so many, orders coming in for new records and stuff. So it was, the waiting process was probably like the toughest part, because the record's been done for almost a year. So to have it finally coming out is like a weight off our shoulders.
One last question for you. Do you look at the creative process of creating a record and the making of the record as a means to an end that gets you to play live, that gets you to go on the road? Or do you look at both aspects of being in the band as two different children of this marriage that you're currently in?
Yeah, it's something we kind of joke about, and it's just like an inside joke. Maybe it's like, all right, well, we just released our ticket to go back on the road for 2 years. That's, we don't honestly think that way, but we also joke about, like, when we go on tour, we're like, all right, well, the traveling t-shirt business is back in order, so those are just jokes. But yeah, it's definitely two sides of the operation. It's like being on the road for 2 years is one thing, it's great, but when you have the light and dark and being able to bounce back to each situation, it's always nice to be in the room and be creative again. So that's why we always try to write in between tours and keep that muscle worked, the creative thing going. So you don't get to a point where it's like, all right, it's time to work on a record and you have nothing, so when it is really time to buckle down, there's a wealth of material already, kind of ideas flowing, but yeah, each thing is touring, and then the creative process of writing and putting out a record, two different things, but I love them both. You
love them equally, as
Yes.
you would as you would your children. So it's the perfect answer. I wouldn't expect anything less from a gentleman like yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Zach, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate talking to you about this record. All the best to you and the guys. The album comes out October 7th on Metal Blade Records. Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven. Goatwhore, go pick it up. Great record. I love the sound. I love the experience. Hope to see you guys on the road very soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for your time, man.
Take care, man. All the best.
Cheers.